The fog had already begun to roll in by the time we entered the woods. It was a fall night, dark and heavy with the scent of damp leaves. I should have known it wasn't the escape we thought it would be. But at that moment, all I could think of was how much I needed a break from everything work, life, everything. I tried to shake the unsettling feeling that had crept in as we walked deeper into the trees. "This is it. The escape we need," Lucas said, his voice cheerful but strained, as though trying to convince himself more than the rest of us. The forest was alive with the sounds of nature, but something felt off. The branches overhead seemed too thick, too tangled. Even the moonlight seemed hesitant to break through. My friend Jade laughed nervously, her eyes scanning the trees, but I could see the same unease in her face that I felt. "We'll be fine," Nate assured, his usual confidence masking the tension in his voice. But as the hours ticked by and the darkness deepened, I felt the weight of it all. There was something in the air, a pressing silence that clung to everything. We had been walking for hours, and the cabin, the one we had heard about from locals, should have been just ahead. But there was nothing, just more trees. Nothing. "Are we lost?" Jade asked, her voice tight with fear. I could hear the panic beneath her calm exterior. We all had our moments, our private thoughts, that maybe this trip wasn't such a great idea. But we had all convinced ourselves that it would be fine, that we were stronger than this, stronger than the whispers that seemed to come from nowhere. The snap of a twig made my heart race. Someone was out there. "Stay close," I muttered. But even I wasn't sure why I said it. There was no reason to be scared. This was just an ordinary forest, but the trees were thick, and the mist was growing thicker. The voices of the others, once full of nervous energy, became quieter, more strained, like we were losing our connection to the world outside. I glanced around, expecting someone to be there, but no one was. When we finally found the cabin, it was abandoned, but not forgotten. The front door creaked as I pushed it open, the hinges groaning in protest. The interior was empty, save for dust and forgotten memories. But there was something about it, something that didn't sit right. It was too clean, too intact, for something that had been left behind for so long. I felt the air thicken, like it was watching us. As I stepped inside, my footfalls muffled by the rotting wood, I couldn't shake the feeling that the walls were closing in on me. The whispers were faint at first, distant murmurs, as though the cabin itself was alive, holding its breath. I told myself it was just the wind, but the others were beginning to feel it too. Jade's eyes darted nervously, and Lucas didn't look as bold as he usually did. The night passed uneventfully, or so we thought. The fire crackled, and we sat in silence, each of us feeling the odd weight of the place. Sleep was impossible, though, despite how tired we all were. And when I closed my eyes, I saw him. My brother. I shook my head, thinking it was a trick of the mind. But he was there, standing in the corner, his face frozen in that last moment of terror. But I wasn't sure if it was real. The night grew colder, and Jade suggested we explore the cabin's attic. I was hesitant, but the pull of curiosity outweighed my unease. We found a trapdoor in the corner of the living room, hidden beneath a layer of old rugs. When we opened it, a cold draft met our faces, and the darkness beyond seemed to stretch endlessly. The attic was small, cramped, and filled with the smell of mildew. But then we found a journal, old and leather-bound. Its pages were yellowed and fragile, but as I flipped through it, my heart stopped. It was a record of events that had happened in the very cabin we were in. A murder, a betrayal, and a curse. The The story detailed a man who had been killed here, murdered by those he trusted, left to rot in the walls. The journal spoke of vengeful spirits, of an ancient entity that lived on fear. As we read further, the air grew heavier, thicker with the weight of history. The whispers we had heard earlier began to swell into words. They were faint at first, barely audible, but soon they were undeniable. My brother's face flashed in front of me again, but this time he wasn't smiling. There was no recognition in his eyes, only emptiness. Something was wrong, terribly wrong. "We need to leave," I said, my voice trembling. But when we tried to gather our things and head back into the woods, we found that the path had changed. The trees were denser, the way we came now lost to us. I tried calling for help, but the signal on my phone was dead. The others were panicking now, and I couldn't blame them. We were trapped in the forest, alone, with something in the shadows. The whispers continued, now coming from every direction. We couldn't see anyone, but I could feel them eyes watching us, unseen forces pushing us into corners. The very air seemed to wrap around us, choking out any hope of escape. I had always feared the woods, but now I knew it was more than just a fear of the unknown. Something was manipulating us, feeding on us. It was Lucas who saw it first. "There's someone out there," he whispered, his voice trembling. We all turned toward him, but the shadows remained still. I swear, I saw someone moving between the trees. But when we tried to follow his gaze, there was nothing, just the fog. It was like the woods had swallowed the world whole, and we were alone, lost in its embrace. The tension was unbearable. Jade, usually the most grounded of us, looked around with wide eyes, her breath shallow. "I don't like this," she whispered. Her usual confidence had evaporated, and I could see that she was beginning to break. We all were. The cabin, the forest. It was a trap. It had always been a trap. And now, we were its prey. I couldn't shake the feeling that my brother was here, somehow, that his ghost had never truly left. I kept hearing his voice, calling to me from the distance. But each time I looked, he was gone. Was it really him? Or was it something else? Something manipulating my memories, my grief? The lines between reality and fear were blurring, and I was losing myself in it. We tried to fight it. We tried to make sense of it all. But the more we searched for a way out, the more the forest seemed to change. The trees shifted, and the sky grew darker. It was as if the very land itself was alive, changing, twisting, reacting to our fear. And with every step we took, I felt the darkness getting closer. We were being hunted, not by a person, but by something much older, much more dangerous. And then, it happened. Jade broke. She was the first to scream. Her voice echoed through the trees, sharp and desperate. She had seen something, or someone, out there in the dark. We tried to calm her, but she was beyond reason. "We have to go," she pleaded. But I knew it was too late. We were already too far gone. The entity was here, and it was feeding on our terror. Jade's screams grew louder, more frantic. She was the one who had always been so strong, the one who held us together. But now she was unraveling, and I couldn't stop it. I couldn't save her. My brother's face appeared again, not as a memory, but as a part of the forest itself. It was like he had become one with the woods, and his eyes. His empty eyes were watching me. As the night deepened, we realized the truth. The forest wasn't just haunted by a spirit. It was haunted by us, by our deepest fears, by the regrets we carried. And the entity wasn't a ghost. It was a force, an ancient evil that fed on our darkest emotions, that used our guilt, our sorrow, our grief as fuel. The forest was alive with it, and we had walked right into its trap. Jade finally confessed. She had been here before, years ago, long before any of us. She had come to the cabin as a child, but something had happened, something she never told us. She had released the spirit, she had freed the entity, and now it was back, seeking its revenge on all of us. The revelation hit us like a ton of bricks. Jade had been hiding this secret, and now it was too late. There was no escape. The entity had returned, and it was stronger than ever. It had been waiting for this moment, waiting for the right group of people to come along. And now it had us. It had everything it needed. The final confrontation came when we realized that the only way to stop it was to confront it head on. But none of us were ready. We had already given too much of ourselves to the fear. It was Jade who made the ultimate sacrifice, stepping forward to face the entity. She knew what needed to be done, but she also knew it would cost her everything. In the end, Jade did what she had to do. She let the entity consume her, offering herself as a final act of redemption. But as she did, she revealed the truth. The entity had never wanted to kill us. It had only wanted to feed on our fears. It had been playing with us all along, twisting our minds, feeding on our pain. As Jade's sacrifice broke the hold the entity had on the forest, I saw my brother's face one last time. But this time it was different. It wasn't angry or full of terror. It was peaceful. He was at rest. And for the first time in years, I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. The forest released its grip on us, and the mist began to clear. We left the woods that night, but none of us were the same. The terror, the horror, the darkness, it had followed us back. It had always been there, lurking just beneath the surface, feeding on our doubts, our fears. And no matter where we went, we knew it would always be with us. The woods had taken something from us, something we could never get back. I can't explain what happened that night, or what it was we faced. But I know this. The real terror wasn't the entity in the forest. It was us, our fears, our guilt, our regrets. That was the true horror we had to face. And once we did, we were free. But only for a moment. I never went back to those woods. But sometimes, when the fog rolls in and the trees seem too quiet, I can feel it again. The whispering, the hunger. It's always there, just beyond the edge of my mind. And I wonder sometimes if I will ever truly escape it. If any of us will. The worst part is knowing that no matter how far I run, the forest never really lets you go. I've tried to convince myself that it was just a nightmare, a bad trip, a hallucination, but I can still hear the whispers, low and insistent, like a memory I can never shake. Sometimes when I wake up in the middle of the night, I can almost smell the damp earth, feel the weight of the fog pressing against my chest, and I know that it's still there, waiting. I tried to reach out to Lucas and Nate, but they wouldn't talk about it. I think they're scared. They pretend like it was all in our heads, that we were just lost in the woods, and that it was nothing more than a shared panic. But deep down, I can see it in their eyes. They feel it too. The fear, the lingering shadow of something we'll never fully understand, something that will follow us to our graves. Jade's disappearance still haunts me. She sacrificed herself for us, for a group of people she barely knew. and I can't shake the feeling that she was the only one who truly understood the depths of the terror we were facing. It wasn't just the entity, it was the burden we all carried, the guilt and fear we had built up over years. And Jade knew that it would take everything we had to stop it, and in the end, it took her. I keep thinking about what she said. Just before she stepped into the darkness, she looked at me, her face pale and resigned, and whispered, "You have to let go." I thought she was talking about the forest, about the entity, but now I wonder if she was talking about something else, something within me, something I've carried for so long, something I can't seem to escape. My brother's death, the accident, the guilt. I know I should have saved him. I should have done something. I should have. But that's just it, isn't it? You can't change the past. And no matter how much I wish I could, the weight of my regret is always there, just beneath the surface. I keep seeing my brother's face, like a reflection I can't escape. And every time I close my eyes, I wonder if he's still waiting in the woods, lost like me. They say time heals all wounds, but I don't believe that. Time just buries them deeper. The scars don't fade. They just become a part of you. Invisible to the world, but always there, gnawing at you from the inside. And sometimes, when the wind howls outside, I hear it. The whispering. The soft, haunting voices that call to me from the edge of the woods. They're waiting, and I don't know if I can resist them forever. I went back to the town once, a few weeks after everything happened. I needed to see it for myself, to see if the people there had heard anything, if anyone knew the truth about what happened in the woods. But when I asked about the cabin, no one would answer. They looked away, their faces shadowed with fear. And that's when I knew. It wasn't just us. The town knew. They all knew, and they were too terrified to speak. A part of me wanted to shout, to demand answers, to tell them that the woods weren't just haunted by some old legend. But I didn't, because I realized something then. I had become part of the story, a small, insignificant chapter in the long history of the forest's horrors. And no matter how hard I tried to leave it behind, I was still bound to it. The entity's grip wasn't just on the forest. It was on me too. I tried to warn the others. Lucas, Nate, Jade. They all needed to understand the truth. But it was too late. They had already moved on. They had already buried it deep inside themselves. Just as I had. The forest was a thing of the past, a memory, a nightmare we would never speak of again. But I knew the truth. And it was that the forest wasn't finished with us. It had only just begun. The dream started again. They always start the same way. The fog, thick and suffocating, wraps around me as I stand in the clearing alone. The trees loom overhead, and the whispers grow louder. I can hear my brother's voice, distant but clear, calling me from somewhere deep within the woods. "Come find me," he says. But I know better than to listen. I know it's not him. It's the forest. It's the entity. Each time I wake, I feel a little more lost. A little further from the world I once knew. I can't tell if I'm being drawn back to the forest, or if it's something within me that won't let go. It's like the woods have seeped into my soul. Like a poison that slowly spreads. And with each passing day, I feel its grip tightening around me. Its whispers getting louder, more insistent. And so I wait. I wait for the inevitable. I don't know if I'll ever be able to truly escape the forest. I don't know if I'll ever find peace. But I know one thing. The forest is always there, just beyond the edge of my perception. And no matter how far I run, no matter how much time passes, I'll never be free of it. The terror is inside me now. As much a part of me as my own thoughts, my own regrets. It's not the forest that haunts me, it's myself.